In the quiet shadows of medieval Europe, far from the thrones of kings and the clang of swords, there existed another world, a world rarely spoken of, often ignored by chronicles written by men and buried under centuries of silence. It was a hidden realm, the world of medieval women, especially those who lived within convents. Women whose voices were silenced by the rules of the church, whose choices were shaped by family power and tradition, and whose stories remain buried beneath stone walls and faded manuscripts. Tonight, we are not telling the history of kings and conquerors. We are not chasing tales of swords, crowns, and battles. Instead, we will step into a forgotten world, the cloisters, the chapels, the small stone cells of convents. We will hear the whispers of those who were forced into silence, but whose souls burned with questions, doubts, and resilience. Scene setting. Imagine a medieval convent. The air smells faintly of wax candles and damp stone. The thick walls trap the cold, and the sound of bells echoes endlessly through the corridors. In the chapel, the voices of women rise together in Latin prayers, filling the vaulted ceilings with echoes that sound both haunting and holy. But if you look closer, beyond the rituals, beyond the silence, you would see more. Women with dreams, women with doubts, women with ambitions, and women with fears, just like us. Some came here willingly, seeking a life of faith, peace, or even learning. Some were brought by force, locked away because their families had no dowry or no patience for rebellious daughters. And some were pushed here as punishment, buried alive in silence because their desires did not fit the world outside. Picture Isabella, a 14-year-old girl in the year 1275. Her father could not afford the dowry to marry her off, and so her fate was sealed, the convent. The wooden doors shut behind her with a deep, heavy sound, a sound that seemed final, like the closing of a tomb. She looked around, surrounded by strange faces and rituals she did not understand. Women in black and white habits moved silently through the halls like shadows. Her heart pounded. She whispered to herself, "Is this my life now?" That first night, Isabella lay on a thin straw mattress. The chill of the stone walls crept into her bones. At midnight, bells rang sharply, breaking the silence. All around her, the nuns rose like phantoms, moving quietly toward the chapel. Isabella hesitated, but then followed. In the dim glow of flickering candles, she knelt on the cold floor. She did not know the words of the prayer, but she felt the weight of centuries pressing down on her. She asked herself, "Did God choose this for me? Or did men decide my fate?" This moment, this quiet rebellion within her, was just the beginning. Life inside the convent, detailed. Life inside a medieval convent was far from peaceful. The day began at midnight with the first prayers, called matins. After only a few hours of rest, more prayers followed at dawn, then work in the gardens, kitchens, or scriptoriums where manuscripts were copied. Silence was enforced. Obedience was demanded. But silence did not erase thought. Behind the still faces and folded hands, women carried questions, doubts, and secret desires. Some found education here. Convents were among the few places in medieval Europe where women could read and write. A few became respected scholars or even mystics, writing works of theology that survive to this day. Others, however, felt imprisoned. To them, the convent was a living tomb. Stories tell us of women who tried to escape, who were punished brutally, or who expressed their despair in letters that still echo across the centuries. Why this matters. Expanded. When we think of convents, we imagine peace, prayer, maybe even safety. But the truth is much more complex. They were places of opportunity and oppression at the same time. Some women found independence there, others found only despair. And tonight, as we explore their hidden stories, we will see. forbidden loves that shook entire communities, secret writings hidden from church eyes, rebellions against strict abbacies, and lives shaped not by choice, but by the power of men. Isabella's next years in the convent. The days turned into weeks, and weeks into years. Isabella grew used to the sound of bells, matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, nun, vespers, and compline. Her life was divided into these sacred hours. But within her heart, she carried questions. Why was she here? Was this truly God's calling? Or was it her family's decision to rid themselves of a burden? One evening, as the last rays of the sun filtered through the stained glass windows, Isabella found herself copying manuscripts in the scriptorium. She dipped the quill into ink, carefully tracing Latin words she barely understood. But then, she began to add something of her own. A single line hidden between the T, words not from the Bible, not from the prayers, but from her own restless soul. If God is love, why is love forbidden here? She paused, her hand trembling. She knew if discovered she could be punished, perhaps even locked in her cell for days without food. But the question burned inside her, and it had to be written. This was Isabella's secret rebellion, not with swords, not with shouts, but with ink. A forbidden friendship. Over time, Isabella found comfort in another young novice, Clara. Their whispered conversations late at night became Isabella's lifeline. Clara spoke of the outside world, markets, music, even festivals she remembered from childhood. To Isabella, these stories were treasures. They reminded her that life beyond the convent walls was real, colorful, noisy, full of choices. But whispers could be dangerous. Abbesses often warned, attachments are snares of the devil. Friendships that grew too close were seen as sinful, even dangerous. And yet, Isabella and Clara shared more than friendship. They shared longing, longing for a world denied to them. While Isabella struggled with her secret doubts, in another corner of medieval Europe lived Agnes, a noblewoman turned nun. Agnes's story was different. She had been sent to the convent not because her family was poor, but because she dared to resist marriage. At just 16, her parents had arranged a match with a wealthy count. Agnes refused. Her refusal brought scandal and shame. Her father, furious at her defiance, declared, "If you will not be a wife, you will be a bride of Christ." And so, against her will, she was taken to the convent. Agnes's anger. Unlike Isabella, Agnes was not silent. She protested. She shouted during prayers. She refused to eat the bland meals served in the refectory. But the convent had its ways of breaking rebellion. Agnes was confined to her cell for weeks, given only bread and water. She was ordered to fast, pray, and confess her sin of disobedience. Her spirit, however, did not break. Instead, it burned. Agnes began to write letters, secret letters to her younger sister, hidden inside the pages of borrowed books. In those letters, she poured out her fury. "They call this a house of God, but for me, it is a prison built by men." Her sister smuggled the letters out, preserving them. Centuries later, fragments of these writings still survive, giving us a rare glimpse into the raw emotions of women who resisted their fate. Isabella meets conflict. Meanwhile, back in Isabella's convent, change was stirring. Clara had fallen ill, a fever that spread quickly among the novices. In the dim infirmary, Isabella stayed by her side, holding her hand when no one else dared. She whispered prayers, but also her fears. "Clara, do you think God truly hears us here? Or is he silent, like these stone walls?" Clara's faint smile was her only answer. Within weeks, Clara passed away. Isabella was shattered. For the first time, she faced the true cost of silence, the true cruelty of isolation. She wrote again in the margins of her manuscript, "God, if you gave us hearts to love, Why do you command us to lock them away? Her rebellion was growing, not open but deep, quiet and unshakable. Why these stories matter. Isabella and Agnes lived in different lands, different centuries, but their voices echo together. Both were young women forced into lives they did not choose. Their stories remind us that history is not only battles and kings, it is also the quiet defiance of those who were silenced. These convent walls, which still stand today in ruins or in preserved monasteries, were not just places of holiness. They were also cages. And inside those cages lived human beings, women who laughed, cried, questioned, resisted, and sometimes broke under the weight of silence. When we hear of forced silence and cloistered lives, another face appears. Hildegard of Bingen. She was a girl given to the convent at a very young age, but unlike many others, she turned captivity into power. Hildegard was frail from childhood, often sick and confined. Yet in her weakness came something extraordinary: visions, flashes of light, strange sounds, and vivid dreams. Some whispered it was illness, others called it the devil's temptation. But Hildegard declared, "This is from God." Visions become power. As she grew, Hildegard began to write down her visions. For a woman in the 12th century, this was dangerous. A bold claim could mean punishment, even excommunication. But she did not stop. Inside her manuscripts, she wrote not just about religion, but about music, medicine, plants, and even the stars. Imagine this. Within the stone walls of a convent, a woman dared to write that the human body is connected to the earth and the cosmos. That illness is not only physical, but also spiritual. That music can heal the soul. These were not mere reflections. They were a form of rebellion,